Hi, I'm Michael with Deacon Woodworks, and I'm coming to you from Deacon's Tap Room here in Huntersville, North Carolina. And I'm a boomer. Boom!
Hey guys, welcome back to the shop and join it number 5. Now, if you saw my Instagram post, you've seen that I had tried a joint that I haven't really tried before. It's a modified version of my lock joint that I lovingly call the half-blind lock joint. Reason being is just because it kind of resembles half-blind dovetails. But I figured I would give it a shot on my next project, and that project will be this. It is a 12 gauge shotgun gun case that will be part of probably a 2-part series. One part will be the construction of the case, and then the other part will be the custom fit foam. It will house all of the shells as well as a cleaning kit if possible. So I plan to use this particular joint on the construction of that case. So I really don't have a down method like I do with my lock joint or my half laps. Since I've never really done it before, I really don't have a down pat method. So this is going to be a finesse kind of joint until I get the perfect fit. And I'm just going to use a flat bottom beveled saw blade. Now you can use a dado stack if you wish to hog out a bunch of material as much as possible, but a single saw blade with a flat bottom bevel edge will work just as good. Now the first thing I want to do is take some dimensional lumber and just cut it into 2 separate pieces so I can make this test cut. You're going to be making this joint, even for a project, with test cuts. So just pretend that's what we're doing. Alright, now we're just going to enlist the help of an old friend of mine. This is a Delta Tenoning Jig that I've had in my possession for quite some time, roughly about 8 years. Ever since I basically started doing woodworking and craft shows. I don't really have a lot of use for this, but when it comes to specialized joinery such as this, it comes in real handy. Now you don't necessarily have to have one of these. You can make a device or a jig that will ride on your existing fence that will go in between the blade and the fence and will pretty much do the same job. This one just has a lot more incremental features for adjustments and things like that. So that's what I intend to use for this, but just know you don't have to have this. Now we're basically going to start by clamping the workpiece into place, making sure that the bottom is completely flat against the table saw and that the clamp is nice and secure in the jig. Now this jig has a really fine-tuned adjustment knob right here on the side that allows me to make passes that are very, very precise. And on my original joint that I made, this piece right here I set to be a 1/16 of an inch, in between that and an 1/8 really. And I really am not fond of how thin it is. Even though it looks really good whenever you put the pieces together, it still is very, very thin. And with this being pine, it really looks bad. But even on this ash that I'm using, I think I want to make it a little thicker. So I just loosen the base, then move the incremental knob over until the measurement says 1/4 inch. Now one more thing to do is to set the height of the blade just past the thickness of the adjacent piece of wood. The reason I'm going just past is mainly because I can always sand down the tongue later. Now because the tongue that I'm making that's going into an adjacent mortise for the lock joint will only be 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch thick, all I really have to do is run this through to make the ingrain tongue that will cover up the ingrain, and then turn the workpiece around and then make another cut for the tongue that will go into the adjacent mortise on the other piece. Alright, now that the borders are established, I just need to clear out the middle. So I'm going to loosen the base and just adjust it to where it's over the blade. Now before we go on to the next step, you need to consider that if you're making a bunch of drawers with this particular kind of joint, you need to batch cut everything before you make any changes. So the first pass and the second pass you can batch cut, then clear out all the centers in a batch cut, then you can go to the next step to make the tongue. Now the next step is to make the tongue, So we're going to lower the blade to where it's below this tongue, but to be able to cut off the bottom tongue. Now, if you are doing this and one tongue is thinner or thicker than the other, you need to make double sure which one you're going to cut off. Since this was perfectly centered, I don't have to worry about it. Now, to set up the depth, like I said, the tongue is only going to be a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. So I've got my 1/4 inch brass bar spacer here that I normally use for half laps as well as any other kinds of blade adjustment. And what I'm going to do is adjust the fence to where the edge of the brass bar is even with the depth of that mortise. And I've got my adjacent piece here against the fence that I'm going to use as a stop block so I can run it through the blade safely. That's pretty close. This won't be exact. I'll fine tune it as I go. Now this is how you fine tune. I've got the 1/4 inch brass bar inside the mortise, and I'm just kind of feeling to see if there's a small little lip. This one has one, so I'm going to take one more pass to shave that off. All right, that is perfect. Now this is where you would be batch cutting the tongues. Now the next thing to do is to set the blade height to a 1/4 inch, because that's exactly how long that shorter tongue is. And since we use this spacer to gauge that, that's what we need to do here. Now the next thing to do is to cut the adjacent mortise that shorter tongue will be accepted inside. Now this is my test piece, but you can see what we're trying to do. This is my piece that I'm going to cut it in. Now to gauge that distance, we're going to have to use the piece that we've been working on to establish where the fence needs to ride. And what we're going to do is put the piece up on edge and run it up to the blade to where the longest tongue is right even to the outside part of the blade. That will establish our first border. So after that one pass, you can see that the outside part of that kerf is dead even with the outside part of the tongue. Now it's not quite perfect. We might have to finesse it just a tiny bit, but it's close enough to get us in the ballpark. Now, once you find that, you need to batch cut those kerfs out because you don't want to move your fence until the next pass. And after just a little bit of finessing on the table saw, some clamps and glue, this joint is ready. Well, now I've got the process figured out on how to make this joint a success. I want you guys to try it out in your shops. And now it's time for me to implement it in a project. Like I said, it's going to be for a gun case, very similar to like the one I built in my archives. I'll leave a link down in the description for that. So that's pretty much it. So guys, thank you for joining me. Be sure and check out my website for a step-by-step tutorial, and I will see you on the build for that gun case. Thanks a lot. Be safe in your shops. Boom!